The EVA1 has a dual native ISO of 800 and 2500. Now this is a little bit lower than the 5000 that's on the VariCam LT and the VariCam 35. Now it can be a little bit confusing setting up the ISO and knowing how to use it. I'm going to show you how to do that, and we're going to have a look at some low light examples to see how the camera performs. Let's have a look at how to set up the ISO settings on the EVA1. So I need to go into my camera settings menu here, and then I'm going to go down to EI. And now I can change the mode from ISO to DB if I want to. I'm going to keep it in ISO for this demonstration, and then you've got below that you've got ISO select. So now it's set on native only. So if I click set on there, you'll see I can now only choose between 800 and 2500 ISO. There's no way of going to anything else when you have it set in the native setting in the menus. If I get out of my menu here and I now toggle between my different ISO settings that I can on the camera, you can see it only gives me the two choices. I can only choose between 800 or 2500. This is what happens if you have it set at native ISO only in the menu system. This is just something that you need to be aware of. I'm going to go back into my EI settings here, and I'm going to go to ISO select, and I'm going to change it now from native only to 800 base. Now if I click set again on there, it's now going to give me some different choices of what I can do. So I can go back in to my menu here, and you can see I can go all the way from 200 all the way up to 2000 when it's in the 800 mode here. That's the only options I've got. Now what you have to remember too is that the ISO values are going to change depending on whether you're using Vlog or in various different scene files. These are going to be different. So I'm going to go back in, and I'm going to change my native ISO to the 2500 ISO setting. And now you can see I can go between 1000 all the way up to 25,600 in this particular mode. So that's just what you have to be aware of when you're using the VariCam, is these different native ISOs and how you have to set them up depending on what you need to use. So let's have a look at some examples taken on the EVA1 in 4K Vlog with the setting at 2500 ISO, and we're going to dial through from the minimums all the way up to the maximums. This is 2500 ISO. I haven't used a LUT or color corrected any of this. You're just seeing the straight Vlog image. I'll show you with a LUT attached after these particular examples. This is just to give you an indication of the sort of noise you can expect that you can see sort of coming off the sensor here when using Vlog. So this is 4000 ISO. This is sort of 5000 ISO. I think the camera's pretty usable up to about 5000 ISO where it's fairly clean. You could get away with readings, I think, a little bit higher. I think once you get over about 10,000, the noise becomes fairly significant, and as soon as you reach levels, as you'll see in these clips coming up a little bit further, upwards of the sort of 16,000 ISO range, it becomes very, very noisy. So this is 10,000 ISO. It's 12,600. Here's 16,000, and you can see it's getting very, very noisy here off the sensor. This is 20,000 ISO. And this is its maximum setting here. This is 25,600 ISO. So you can see, very, very noisy. So here's those exact same clips again. Now all I've done is add a basic LUT. I'm not trying to color correct or grade this material. I'm just simply adding a LUT so you can get a more realistic expectation of what sort of noise you're going to encounter at various ISOs. So that's 2500. Now we're rolling up to 3200 ISO. This is 4000 ISO. Now we're up to about 5,000, which for me is probably, sort of limit that I would go to on this camera. I think even at an extreme, I think 5,000 would be it for me. This is now 6,400. Still doing an all right job, but you can see the noise starting to become introduced particularly now once you get to about sort of this 8,000 level here. You can see the sort of noise, pattern noise starting to emerge, which is a little bit nasty. Here's at 10,000, you can still see that quite clearly as well. We rock up here to 12,600. And now 16,000, where it's starting to get really nasty. Now 20,000, and you see it's really starting to fall apart now. The noise is really evident. And this is maxing out here at 25,600, and very noisy. Now the EVA1 does have the ability to add noise reduction in camera, and you can set this at either the 800 or 2500 ISO values here. So again, we're going to go into camera settings. We're now going to go down into noise reduction, and you can see we can, depending on whether we have our 800 or 2500 ISO values selected. So I'm just going to go ahead here and I'm going to turn it on. And I'm going to put it here to level 2, which is its maximum amount of noise reduction here on the 2500 ISO base. So one thing you do need to be aware of though is it's not going to tell you that you're using noise reduction anywhere here on the LCD screen. It doesn't have any indicator saying I'm using noise reduction. So you've got to remember to either turn it on or turn it off depending on what you're doing. It's very easy for something like this to just forget and leave it on. So you really need to be careful and always go back in after you finish shooting something and just recheck it, and just make sure it's either turned on or off depending on whether you need to use it or not, if you're shooting in low light or just in normal lighting conditions. So now I'm going to turn on the noise reduction and do those same tests again to see if there's any significant difference in terms of the noise that gets removed. This way I'm going from the highest setting down to the lowest, just so you can see. I'm just doing it in a different way, so I'm just going to gradually reduce the ISO down to see what's taking place. Hard to see at these very high ISOs whether the in-camera noise reduction is actually making much of an effect at all. I'll do a couple of split screen comparisons towards the end so we can have a bit of a closer look to see what's happening there. This is 12,600 ISO with the noise reduction set at 2. This is 10,000. This is at 8,000. This is at 6,400. And again, this is at 5,000, which is probably about the most I would be comfortable using, I think, on this camera if I actually had to. This is 4,000 ISO. Roll back through to 3,200 ISO. And finally, we're back here at 2,500 ISO. Now we're going to do a split screen comparison so we can see the difference between having the noise reduction turned on and turned off. I've just chosen 10,000 ISO just for this particular test, and you can see that the in-camera noise reduction is definitely doing a better job than not using the noise reduction. But it's not too aggressively done. And just here for another example, we're just going to remove the LUT and show you the straight V-log image, and you can definitely see that the noise reduction is certainly helping out in this case.